Good day, everyone. I'm Lovely Galpo Quinones, and I'm going to discuss the feminist thought and the ethics of care. So, what is feminist thought? At its core, feminism is the belief in full social, economic, and political equality for women. Feminism largely arose in response to Western traditions that restricted the rights of women, but feminist thought has global manifestations and variations. So now, let's proceed to the ethics of care. What is the ethics of care? Ethics of care, also called care ethics, feminist philosophical perspective that uses a relational and context-bound approach toward morality and decision making. The term ethics of care refers to the ideas concerning both the nature of morality and normative ethical theory. So now let's proceed to Galligan's ethics of care. Psychologist Carol Galligan is better known for her innovative but controversial ideas on the moral development of women. Galligan emphasized what she called an ethics of care in women's moral reasoning. She placed her approach in direct opposition to Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development, which she claimed was biased against females and emphasized an ethics of justice. Let's proceed to the gender in moral reasoning and the ethics of care. This research tests Galligan's hypothesis that men are more likely to consider moral dilemmas chiefly in terms of justice and individual rights, whereas women are more likely to be chiefly concerned with questions of care and relationship with others. So let's proceed to the three stages of moral development that emphasize ethics of cares. The first stage is the pre-conventional stage, which is women are focused on the self. The second one is the conventional stage, which is women are come to focus on their responsibilities towards others. And the last one, post-conventional stage, a woman has learned to see herself and others as interdependent. Galligan developed her thinking in response to the stages of moral development outlined by Lawrence Kohlberg, which Galligan claimed were gender biased and emphasized an ethics of justice. However, research by other scholars has shown that two moral orientations exist, one towards care and one towards justice. Previous ethical theories have put forward universal principles of morals, virtues, and justice. From the 1980s, an alternative paradigm emerged that criticized the dominant perspectives. This paradigm is called feminist ethics and care ethics, and it basically emphasizes connection to others. In this paradigm, women's nurturing relationships are taken as a model for care, where everyone has responsibilities and an obligation to care for others. In the words of Daniel Engster, caring is understood as everything we do, directly to help others to meet their basic needs, develop or sustain our basic capabilities, and alleviate or avoid pain or suffering in attentive, responsive, and respectful manner. Feminist ethics call for more attention to the moral issues that arise in the so-called private world which relate to the housework and taking care of children, the disabled, and the elderly. One of the main criticisms by feminists ethicists was that the current ethical theories were not actually universal, as they may not apply to everyone. The publication of In a Different Voice Psychological Theory in Women's Development in 1982 can be seen as the start of this movement. This publication consisted of a study by developmental psychologist Carol Gilligan on how women's ways of analyzing and resolving dilemmas differed from men's. At that time, general ideas about morality were based on formal and abstract notions of rights, rules, and justice. For instance, according to Lawrence Kohlberg, study among men, humans start as individual, moral agents who are separate from others, and who then independently learn moral principles to obey. However, Gilligan noticed that Kohlberg's description of moral development did not always apply to women. She argued that women's moral development was much more characterized by a morality of responsibility and care. This moral development already begins with the self, who is connected to others, and whose moral goals are to maintain such connectedness. Feminist theorist Neil Noding had a similar viewpoint and argued that ethical theories were too male-centered by focusing on reason and law and justice, which were thought to be inherently male values and not enough on feminine values such as empathy, relatedness, and responsiveness. This is not to say that justice was no longer important, but justice was seen as an extension of caring. As Nuding argues in her book Starting at Home, justice itself is dependent on caring about, and caring about is in turn dependent on caring for. Although feminist ethics of care Feminist ethics or care ethics were founded in the idea that men and women differ in their ethical and moral decision making. These perspectives prescribes how both women and men can engage in decision making that is characterized by putting oneself in someone else's shoes and acting on feelings of empathy. In fact, feminist ethics has been criticized for being too female biased and for doing exactly the same as the dominant perspective they criticize. That is, focusing on the biological and social differences between men and women rather than a universal human being. Let's go on to the ethics of care extend to men. Can the ethics of care extend to men? While the ethics of care was developed based on research with women, Galligan has insisted that the ethics of care and the ethics of justice aren't mutually exclusive. Instead of focusing on gender, Galligan preferred to focus on the different themes brought up by these two perspectives on morality. Although this meant that men could develop an ethics of care, Galligan indicated it was likely more common in women. That's all. I hope you learned something about the topic I've discussed. Thank you.